Today's episode is brought to you in full by Heartlifter International, a 501c3 dedicated to making home and family the safest, most secure place on earth. Learn how you can donate and support the podcast at heartliftcentral.com. Now, settle in for today's remarkable conversation with Janelle. Wherever you find yourself today, may these words help you become stronger in every way.
Hello, Heartlifters. Welcome to today's conversation with Jen Pollock Michel. I am so excited to finally bring this conversation to you. This is what Publishers Weekly had to say about her newest book, In Good Time. 8 Habits for Reimagining Productivity, Resisting Hurry, and Practicing Peace. Time belongs not to us, but to God, contends Jen. Lambasting time management strategies that prioritize productivity, Jen argues that readers must instead accept that there is always enough time to do what God has planned. Jen succeeds in putting earthly concerns in cosmic perspective. These insightful musings are worth a look. High praise from Publishers Weekly. I recorded this conversation with Jen a while ago, but it is absolutely on time, in my humble opinion. Today in the United States is Election Day. We all hold our breath, we wait with bated breath, and we pray. Jen's book brings to us some very, very good questions. She says, what is a good use of time? What is fitting for this season in your life? Ooh, it's an invitation to embrace seasonality. And what here and now faithfulness are you calling me to, God? Whew. She encourages us to open our hands and receive every season that God brings into our lives. Is that easy? No, it is not. Together we talk about her 8 habits and the rule of life that she is currently really embracing. The very end, the 8th step, is one that I am not letting go of easily. It's remember. And she brings forth a teaching from the incredible Benedictine monastery. To remember you die. She says this will help orient us to real time, to the here and now. And it is a sobering scope of life. Heartlifters, welcome Jen to this riveting, remarkable conversation. Welcome, Jen. I am so grateful, as I just said before we hit record, of you saying yes to this conversation, because your voice is one that I respect, and I know it's one that's going to just be such an honor to my community to hear. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really a gift.
Oh, that's so nice. You have 5 books, so I have this plethora of choices before me of where I wanted to go. And I just want to pick a little bit from each of them, actually. One of them is how you say to imagine your relationship with time. That just took my breath away. Primarily because I'm right there. I'm living in that at this moment, and my age, my season of life. And I know that there are so many in my community that are addressing it as well. Time seems to be flying by. So what is it about, how can you help us, I guess? How can you help us reimagine our relationship with time, perhaps?
I think probably the biggest learning for me that I try to represent in the book is to push back on the idea that we can manage time. I think, I know. And this is not to say that, we can't be diligent in our days and intentional.
Mhm.
But it is to say that a lot of the things that are given to us, kind of like a lot of the advice given to us by time management experts, time management
Mm.
books, really assumes a great deal of control. And I just don't think we have as much control as we want, for sure,
Mhm.
or imagine that we'd have. And really, the book, I mean, the backstory that's threaded throughout the book is the pandemic, of course,
Yes.
because I think that is when I started to realize I have so little control. Time was completely disrupted for all of us. So, what am I going to do now?
Completely. Yes.
A-
Yes.
And we want to manage time. I think the other thing with the pandemic is that I would have said going into the pandemic, my biggest time problem is busyness. And then suddenly we're
Right.
in the pandemic, and just
Mhm.
where I was in my particular life stage and age, my kids were fairly self-sufficient at the time. So they were at home and they were doing schooling online, but they were managing that pretty capably themselves.
Wow. How old were they at
And
that time? I'm just
they
curious.
were, so we had one in college, and
Oh,
then
wow.
we had one who was a senior in high school, all the way down to the twins, I think might have been in sixth
Oh,
grade.
I have twins.
So we kind of had that, we stretched that gamut. So I was left with a lot more time in the pandemic. I wasn't driving them places. Our family calendar was cleared. I still had all this time anxiety. And that's when I started to think, well, I guess busyness isn't my main problem, because I still feel pretty anxious about time, even though I'm not busy. I think that was where I started to think I've got to reimagine my relationship with time. I need a new story of time,
Oh, that's
need some
good.
better categories, for thinking about time.
That's super good. And that book you're referring to is A Good Time. That's what it's
In good
called.
time. Yep.
In Good Time. Sorry
In
about
good
that.
time.
Yes.
No
8
problem.
Habits for Reimagining. The subtitles are my favorite thing with authoring.
Yeah.
And this is a good one. 8 Habits for Reimagining Productivity, Resisting Hurry. The placement of these verbs and practicing peace. That
Mm,
seems formulaic even of itself,
mm,
is really reimagining productivity, and that will help us resist hurry, which will help us practice peace. And this book came out
hmm
in late 2022, December 2022.
hmm
So you had had some pandemic time in your pocket, but as we know in author worlds, you were writing this book probably pre-pandemic. I don't know. You tell me.
I wasn't writing it
Okay.
pre-pandemic. Although in so many ways, so many of my books, I'm like, I feel like I've been writing these my whole life. So
Yes.
every single book comes out of a lived experience. And this particular book is just, I mean, probably 3 decades of trying to manage my time. A lot of that being temperament and personality, kind of type A, get things done. But a lot of that just being life too. 5 kids, a busy husband, busy career with his career, and just kind of, orienting to that,
Yeah.
how that affected our household. And then, yes, following the desire to write, and how was that going to fit in? And so I just
Yeah.
was always in search of the strategies to multiply time.
Right. Yeah. How can I do this? How did you fit in writing these books while raising 5 kids?
Well,
While
I
you
was,
continue to raise these
yeah.
5 kids, because that never
I
stops.
That's true. That is true.
It doesn't.
I sent them to school, I mean, that's really what happened. I sent them to
Okay.
school and just kind of wrote during the school day and treated it like any other job. And
Hmm.
I would say, it mostly got done in those hours. There have been occasional Saturdays or,
Of course.
longer stretches of time that, maybe I'll get away and do a writing retreat, but pretty much
Hmm.
just like any other job, just kind of, yeah, getting it done when they're at school. And there's been one of the things I just really love about writing is how much flexibility it's given me to have a family life and to
Yeah.
flex during the summer and school vacations and the
Yeah.
like.
Right from anywhere. Exactly. That's
Hmm
one part of it that I love. I've tried to find those arenas in which I can work for a very long time till I'm very old
Yeah.
because I
Isn't
love
that
to
the
learn.
beautiful thing about writing is
Yes.
that
Yes.
I remember I met Lucy Shaw. I don't know if you know
Oh
Lucy
my
Shaw.
goodness.
Do you love
Yes.
Lucy Shaw?
Yes, I love Lucy Shaw.
I mean, it was years ago. I think it was probably
Oh,
over
met
10 years
her.
ago that I met her, and she was, I mean, kind of old then, and she was still writing. And,
Yeah.
it's the examples like that that just really encourage me and motivate me.
What did you take away from her? Any thoughts or?
Well, I think one of the things that I think is just incredibly wonderful is that there's just not a retirement age. Who's to say that you have to retire when you're 65 as a writer?
Mhm.
I think writers, and I mean, you're nodding your head, so I'm assuming that you agree with this. We make sense of our lives just by putting words on a
Yeah.
page. And
Oh, yes.
I don't know if I'm going to be done with that at 65. I don't think so. And I
No,
hope
I'm
that I,
64. You will not.
okay, so I'm going to keep going.
No, you will not. I promise. I think on some respects, I'm figuring out a lot more.
Yes. What a better writer you can be,
Mhm.
right? The
I
more
think
lived
so.
experience and wisdom. I mean,
I
it's
think
kind of
so.
embarrassing that I even wrote my first book at 40. What did I know at 40?
I wrote a parenting book first, and I was in my third. I'm like, what on God's
What
green
have
earth
I
did I think I
done?
was doing, and how did that publisher trust me? 'Cause, I mean, we went from rock solid as the name of the book to rock slide. It was just such a test. I will say.
Oh, that's good. I
Well,
mean,
it's the
good,
truth.
not good to live through, but very
No, but it's
aptly.
like you think you know all that, right? But it was, I think, much like you're writing and the work that you do with the rule of life. Now I would look back at that first writing venture as I was writing and trying to figure out the rules of
Mm,
life for a functional home, a first
yes.
generation healthy, whatever that is.
Yeah.
This being my husband, I come both from alcoholic homes. It was
Mm,
like, I've got to figure out what's important
yes.
and, lived on the words of Elizabeth Elliot, Amy Carmichael, just these, beautiful
Hmm.
women, Lucy Shaw, one of them as well. Just what is the rule of life that I need? I would not have known to call it back then. I knew
Yeah.
nothing of the monastic world. I was in
Mm.
charismatic Christianity, raised Catholic. So today, I mean, in Belgium, just was able to go to Bruges and walk through the
Oh,
incredible Benedictine monastery,
wonderful.
hallowed ground. I just was like, oh my gosh. Can I just
Mm.
live in one of those little rooms,
Can I
please?
also get, electric? I don't know. I'm sure they've updated all of their
Yes.
amenities, but
Yes. Exactly. But
I'm gonna need plumbing.
yes. And yes, and a kettle and electricity. Yes. But I did say to my daughter, like we were standing there and I said, this would be my dream for the last days, like where I could just live in one of those beautiful spaces and walk across. There's a gorgeous church and a college and just teach in the
Mm.
college, live in that little
Oh,
room. She's like, wow,
wonderful.
wouldn't you? Of course you would. I was like, I'm going to dream it. I'm going to believe it. Why can't I? Why can't I?
Right. Why not?
Okay. So, this relationship with time, which is so, so critical. What were your 8 life-giving habits? I mean, I can list
Mm.
them. I don't know if you can call them out from your mind. I have a book. I can look at it.
Yeah, I think I can. I think I can remember. The first one is to begin. I think it's
Oh,
a habit of
yes.
hope, and really believing that God is always beginning and completing His work
Mm,
that He begins in us. And the
love
second
that.
habit is receive. A lot of people really resonate with this habit. This is really the transition from managing time to receiving time, and just
Oh
the
my
idea that
gosh.
we're receiving our lives. We're receiving time as a gift. And we're
Okay.
receiving interruptions. You want to pause there?
Oh, I do. Okay. Wow. We call these lean in moments here.
Mm,
Receiving time, not managing
yes.
time.
Yeah.
So receiving time looks like what?
Well, I think it looks like gratitude, number one. I think our relationship to time tends to be, we operate on a scarcity mindset. There's never enough. It's always vanishing from our, from our lives, sifting through our fingers. And I think this receiving time is to live into a new story of time. It's to believe that God is the giver of time. God is the giver of plenty. God is not a giver of scarcity. So whatever time I have is the time he's ordained and declared to be sufficient for the
Yes.
scope of my life. So I think it's gratitude. I think it's trust. I think it's patience. I think and there's a lot of patience in
Yeah.
this book.
Yeah.
You've got to receive your interruptions. You've got to receive the detours of your life that you just would never have chosen. You wouldn't have planned. But what do we believe about God? Do we believe that, he got caught off guard, he was taken up with another customer at that season of our life? Or do we really believe he wisely has ordained, all the days that are given to us? I think
That's so good.
that alone starts to reshape your relationship to time,
You're
just every
reshaping mine.
day.
Yeah. Right now you are. Right now. Just
I hope. I would say they're all pretty fundamental. That one is a pretty big one,
okay.
receiving time.
All right. I will probably have to move on from there, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
Just that mind shift. That's a shifting. That's receiving the detour really spoke to me, like receiving the caregiving of a mother, the receiving of a sudden loss of someone.
Yes.
The receiving that I can feel my brain like changing, like rewiring and going, okay, that I can do that. That it's like repelling bitterness and repelling a grudge, repelling just malicious. I can just feel it. Thank you. That's life-changing. That's really good.
Well,
okay. 3.
That's true for me too. The third one is belong. I think a lot of times when we go down the time management route, what we know is that if you want to manage your time, you got to shut your door. You got to keep out the interruptions. You can't let people like demand things of you. Set these really firm boundaries. And not that there's anything wrong with, you have certain activities of your life that you have to close the door. So you can get the work done, so you can do the things God's called you to do. And as a writer, and this too, that is a big part of the writing life, is closing the door. But I think that the vision that God has for us is to belong to other people. And I think, we have so much research that says that people feel their lives to be purposeful and significant and meaningful in direct proportion to the kinds of relationships that they enjoy.
For sure.
And this is God's vision for us. And so there's
for sure.
Community, and that means taking up burdens for other people. I wish community were all just like bells and whistles and rainbows.
Cafe
but
visits.
it's a lot of burdens and interruptions and contingencies and responsibilities and service. And it is, great joy and enjoyment that community, belonging, like these represent goods in our lives too, but they're just not unassailed goods. They come with, there's a cost. There's a cost to belonging.
There is a cost to belonging. Sounds like a really good article. Like you probably are.
Well, it's funny because someone just last night I was teaching at church, and we were talking about the builders, Jesus' parable of the builders at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. One builds on a foundation of rock and the other one doesn't. And why is that? And you think, well, people don't build on the foundation because it's costly. It's costly to excavate rock.
Yes.
Much easier, much more time efficient, much more, cost efficient if you can just build your house on sand. And all of these habits that I'm really talking about do take time. And they're not efficient.
Absolutely. No, I would totally agree. And that's why, to me, when you put rule of life in there, the rule is very important, because so many people don't want rules, but it's like, we don't have them. We're just going to end up on sand and sinking. I live, hour and a half away from the beautiful Outer Banks of North Carolina. And, we were always seeing houses being washed out into the ocean, because they're built on sand and they haven't done it properly. And very, very, very wise. All right. Belonging. Okay. We've got belonging.
Yes. So we're only through 3.
I know, but they're so good.
The fourth one is offer. You receive your life
Yeah.
and then you offer it back to God in worship. And it starts to remind us that what God really wants from us as his people, well, he does want us to belong to him. He's called us to be his treasured possession. Any ways that we would kind of quote unquote use our days are ultimately for the goal of worship. And so I think we can get away. I think if we go down the time management route, it's often like, I've got to use all these, like use and usefulness is kind of the vocabulary
Urgency.
that we reach for. And what about just worship? And there's a lot of there's getting caught up in a story that's just way bigger than the life that we're living now, it's like
Yes.
from, year before the beginning and after the end, like from, you are God from everlasting to everlasting. And I think
Yeah.
worship orients us to that story. And
Yeah.
it gives us a lot of meaning and purpose to all that we do, even the things that just don't seem that important in any
Oh, yeah.
worldly sense, right?
Mm.
Like you talked about caregiving up for a mom. And I
Oof.
don't know if you're referring to me or to you, but caregiving in general
I
is
guess
not very
both.
valued.
Oh
Yeah.
my
Are you
gosh,
caring for your
9
mom?
years, a 9-year detour
Wow.
for me. Yeah. Of just managing. And yeah, she actually passed of COVID in the first
Oh,
August of 2020,
wow.
which was 92, so strong. But, it was like, we just thought there's no way this COVID won't get her.
Wow.
Um, but I just think I did not frame that 9-year detour as receiving from God until the
Yeah.
latter part of it.
Hmm.
And it's so hard and so invisible and just,
Yes.
so yeah, I think that when I was in Belgium, I was reading this book written by a pastor in South Africa called How to Be Unsuccessful.
Mm,
And just,
what a great title.
it just was mind blowing for me. Just kind of like your idea of not throwing away time management, obviously, but seeing it in the lens of
Mhm.
eternity, seeing it in the
Yeah.
lens of God and advancing the kingdom of God more than our own kingdoms.
Mm.
And one of the last questions he posed was, what if your most successful, greatest work in life was never known by anybody?
Wow.
I was like, oh,
Wow.
I don't know I like that.
I know. How about
Yeah.
both? How about both and?
Yeah, it's a both and. I mean, everything's both and. It's
Right.
gonna, absolutely. And he was absolutely bringing that in, obviously. But for me,
Mm.
I don't know if you know the Enneagram or whatever, but I can be an Enneagram 3. I'm an Enneagram 2, but I can just be that ambition,
Mm.
ambition, ambition, because that was placed on me
Yes.
on many levels. Okay, so
Hmm.
we're belonging,
Yeah. We're belonging, we're
we're
worshiping, we're
worshiping.
receiving, we're
Yep,
beginning in God's beginning.
beginning. Love that.
Yeah. And then we're waiting.
Oh, oh.
I know. Do we have to talk about waiting? I had a friend years and years ago who said, God's way with us is waiting. And that has just always
Ooh,
stuck with me. And I think
yeah.
if you look at the biblical story, you look at characters, I mean, just everybody, Abraham to Hannah to
Mm,
Job,
yeah.
just it seems like there's just a lot of waiting that God
Mhm,
asks of his people. We don't like it. We do feel that their waiting is kind of wasted time.
mhm.
And I think one of the things I'm saying in that chapter is that it can't be wasted time. And this is actually, I talk about it
Yeah.
even in the language of dormancy. When you think
Oh,
about,
yes.
a tree, a plant, winter is a season of waiting. It's a season of dormancy.
It's
But there's
dead.
so much good that's going on underneath the soil. And I think that's true for us in our lives of faith.
Yeah.
Our wintering seasons might prove, to really be the kind of the catalyst for our most fruitful seasons.
I agree.
And so we can't short circuit them. We
Mhm.
need to receive them. We need to continue to believe that God's doing good in the midst of them.
Yes, I couldn't agree more, for sure. Wintering,
Hmm. Yeah.
wintering.
Okay, so the next one is practice. Practice.
Ah, yes. One of my favorites.
So there's a way in which I was grown up when I was growing up, I kind of thought of that with contempt, that the things that you practice, like
Oh,
that would just
yes.
lead to rote repetition.
Mm-hmm.
But there's all this language in the Bible to practice, to just put in practice, just
In
keep
practice
practicing.
all the
And
time.
it's like I think it's a way to think about persevering.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's actually a much more hopeful way than we tend to be very goal oriented. I
Mm-hmm.
think as just people and American
Yep.
evangelicals, we set these really high aspirations and
Thank
it's
you.
like the once and done kind of effort. And
Thank you,
practice is
Jen.
all about
Yeah.
habitual motion.
I think that practices, I mean, Paul said it so many times. I just think of him all the time, put it into
Yeah.
practice. I mean, I was a
Yep.
dancer, so I know how important practice is, but I
Absolutely.
think I have been so grateful for the resurgence of voices like yourself and others who are bringing, liturgical prayers and all kinds of written prayers back into our lives. And when I
Hmm.
can't pray for myself, I always go to theirs, and wasn't
Hmm.
Christ liturgical in giving us just the Our Father? Like, just,
Yeah.
this is the only thing you
Abs-
need to pray, it's like,
he was immersed in the practices, the habits, and the
mhm.
traditions of ancient Judaism. So
Yeah,
we see it in the life of Jesus, we see it in the nation of Israel, and we see it in the
yeah.
commandments of, the writings of Paul. So I think there's just a lot of wisdom. I think Christians very early on knew that, and then they had certain
Mhm,
practices, and then
mhm.
of course, once you get to the Reformation, there is a lot of important teaching on how practices can go awry. They can
Oh my
become a
goodness,
kind of
yes.
works righteousness or a legalism, and I think those are important dangers to pay attention to. The distortion of something doesn't necessarily mean it's not a good,
Don't
it
throw it
just is
away.
a right.
Right.
We have all kinds of goods that we can distort and corrupt. And so yeah, I want to
Always,
call
right?
people back to practice. I think so in so many different areas.
So many. Yeah.
Hmm.
What practice do you really hold close right now? Like, we're always in different seasons. So I'm curious
Mm.
which practice in life is something that you're really getting life from.
Mm. Well, I am practicing a rule of life, which you've kind of mentioned,
Hmm.
and I've been teaching some workshops on that. That has been wonderful. I think that there's a contemporary resurgence of interest in a rule of life because I think we're
Yeah.
experiencing just, we're overwhelmed by our choices. We're just distracted all the time. We kind of
Mhm.
realize our attention is just
Oh,
always compromised. And so
oh,
I think people want a practice or a set of practices that help them to be intentional, not distracted, help
mhm.
them like create a grid for like discernment around
Yes.
all of the overwhelming choices and decisions that we have. And then just help us to just tune into God's voice. We are inundated with so many different voices.
Oh my.
So a rule of life practice, I've come to think of it as this creative way that we pattern our lives, so it's a set of habits and practices we take up to live in faithful response to God's voice. And
Mm,
it's not selectively spiritual. I mean, parts of my rule are about the relationships I really feel called to
mm.
invest in, the work that I feel called to do, the place that I'm in, the body that I inhabit. How am I taking care of these things?
Good.
And it's actually just formalized. It's just I've written some things out. I've
So
gotten
fun. I can't
clear
wait.
on
Hmm.
some vision and some commitment in my life, and I am finding that really to be very fruitful.
I would say that I can hear in my ear, my Heartlifter's going, okay, 5 kids. Okay, Jen, I have 4 kids. I have 3 kids. I have a lot of women in their 30s and 40s, and I
Mm,
can just hear them. Right. Any
yeah.
one word of advice, wisdom from
Mm.
your own experience of life?
Yeah. Women's lives, I think, are more seasonal, I think, than men's lives in many
Mhm.
ways. I think it's
Yeah.
because we just, the research shows where we tend to, care more for the children and care more for our
Mhm.
homes. And then I would also just say, I mean, we experience these hormonal things that, I mean,
Oh,
your
yeah.
body, I feel like I've had
Lord.
like 18 wardrobes, my entire, because it's like, the pre-pregnancy, and then the early pregnancy,
Still look
and then
like
the
you're 30,
pregnancy,
Jen.
and then
I
the
mean, you look so young. Oh my gosh. That is not flattery. That is true. You look like you're 30 some. It's incredible. I don't know how old you are, but wow.
I am 49. I'm going to be 50 this year.
Oh, this is a big year.
This is a big year. So when I think about women's lives and I think about the seasonality of women's lives, one of the biggest learnings, even just from the book In Good Time, is about this concept of fitting time. And I found it in a commentary on Ecclesiastes. And it was just this idea that how do we discern, what is a good use of time? And I'm going to put use in quotes. And he says, and this particular person just drew my attention to this idea of what is fitting for the moment, what is fitting for the season. That everything is good. Everything good is good in its time. There's a season for everything, Ecclesiastes 3. And so this idea that, are you living in a proper relationship to your season? If you're in a season of raising young children, that will exact certain demands of you. And you have to attend those in that season because they won't be there in 15 years.
You will not get that back.
You don't get it back. And just similarly, if you're gestating a new human, that's a particular given of your life. You've got to live into that season.
Yes.
You don't have another time to take care of your body that's growing another human being. So I just think that there's an invitation for us to embrace the seasonality of life.
I love that.
And exercise the wisdom that is really required to say, okay, what now, Lord? What here and now faithfulness are you calling me to?
Gosh, I love that so much. I love that. Is this fitting for this time, this day, this minute, even sometimes?
Right. Absolutely.
I love that. I think you're giving so many paradigm shifts as well in our thinking, which is what my goal is for this year, to help shift my thinking away from the cultural driven demand, even within the church, of what's shaped me, or what's shaping us. It's like, but is this really a Jesus shaping?
Yes.
I've got so much dissonance in my brain about that as a woman of 64, with just how I was trained,
Interesting.
as a woman in the faith world. So that's so, so good. I just hope everyone takes a pause and lets that just soak in to what is fitting for this particular time. And then we speak a lot in this community of Kairos and Chronos time.
Yeah.
Which is very, very important to know. All right, I think we're on 7 or 8.
We're on 7.
Okay.
7 is enjoy.
Oh,
So,
yes.
I know you get to delight in your
Yes,
in the
it's
time.
my word. I love it.
Is it?
Well, I have shared with my audience, and I just got one of these beautiful identity bracelets made that says Joy Builder.
Oh, wonderful.
Because in the work that I do with trauma, I do a lot of trauma work with family systems and write about it, mental health, all that stuff. And what I have concluded after 13 years of it being in my own life as well as my clients is that what's missing is joy building.
Interesting.
And I found an article this past year that just changed my whole life. And in the respect of not spending, as much time dwelling on the past or looking at the past, but really, truly, and I know that this principle within the monastic world, the ancient, I love that you study the ancient, spiritual wisdom and bring it to us in a contemporary way, is we have to live in the here and now. You just said it. We have to.
Yeah.
But it's not easy.
It's not easy. I know. Everyone's like, be mindful. And you're like, yeah, but how?
Yeah. Oh, sure. Right. I'll look at my raisin, and I took an 8-week course in mindfulness-based stress reduction, and it was amazing. But how do I make this work? Oh my gosh. Okay. That's so good. Thank you.
Yeah, it's funny that I think you're so right to relate it to kind of this sense of like being attentive to the present moment. Because some of the research that I was looking at was saying the way we experience time right now, because time is accelerating, technology is accelerating our experience of time, that we don't actually look back as much as we should. We're constantly thinking ahead because we've got to like conserve the resources for whatever is going to be needed tomorrow. And so the time that we're not living really is the now time.
Yep.
And interestingly enough, the most joyful experiences for human beings give like, it's almost like time kind of disappears. You're so fully immersed in the moment. You just can't, you're not looking at your watch when
Not
you're
a bit.
doing something that is bringing you so much joy. One of the stories that I tell in the book was just this, we did some mountain climbing, some rock climbing. I mean, gosh, I don't want to say mountain climbing, but it was rock climbing. I just love that. I love to be in nature. I love to be having a physical challenge like that. And when you've like reached a certain point, and all you do is like, you're just feeling the wind, you're looking at the expanse, the vast expanse of the landscape. Like, you're not going like, what time is it, guys? I really think, you're hoping just that time, you don't want to know what time it is because you don't want to know that the sun's going down and on this day.
That's exactly right. Yeah. You want to be aware of it. Of course, you want to not wait too long to go back down the rock.
That's true. That's true.
So there is, you want to be aware, and that's a good thing.
Right.
But I do think that, especially a lot of my audience, a lot of the work that I do are people that have experienced childhood trauma and in some little t, middle t, big T way. It's all trauma. It's all emotions that are too big for your body. It's very difficult to be still. It's very difficult to not be in a hypervigilant state. So one of the ways that you counter that, or one of the ways that you have to train yourself, is to be out in nature. So I think that is where, if that's what I was saying a moment ago of joy building, like I want to be out of my practice. I want to be out of work. I want people to not need counseling or therapy anymore. And I think one of the greatest ways of that is just starting to practice paying attention and experiencing joy in the minute, in the moment.
Yes.
Slow down. And you write about that. Right? That's the subtitle, right? Is that resisting hurry in order to practice peace. Okay. I have to keep going, and I don't want to because this is so good. Okay. I think we're on the last. We're
on the last one. The last one doesn't feel like the most hopeful ending, but it is the monastic wisdom of remembering that you die. So it's remember.
Ooh.
Remember, and I just find it fascinating that in the Benedictine monasteries, like this is just something that they rehearse and repeat to each other. Remember that you die. Remember that you die, and it right sizes our lives, our ambitions, our aspirations, and I think it does just give us a scope. It's a sense of scope, a sobering sense of scope that most of the things that we're really caught up with are probably not all that important. And that's, the proverbial, once you get somebody on their deathbed, they never say, gosh, I wish I had worked more, or wish I'd spent all that time wringing my hands about email. They get to the end of their lives and they have a proper sense of what really mattered. And I think the monastic wisdom is, okay, don't wait till you're on your deathbed.
No.
Just every day, remember that you die, because that is going to properly orient you to your time.
Yes.
It's a beautiful story that I tell in the book, and one that, a lot of readers, they don't know how it turns out, but I'm telling about my friend who has metastatic breast cancer, and I'm able to visit her, and that's kind of how that chapter opens. And I just don't know, how much time she will be given. And she was diagnosed in 2020, and I honestly didn't know if I would be able to see her because she lives in Scotland. I was living in Canada at the time. Borders are closed. I was able to go, though, and be with her while her husband traveled for a conference in November of 2021. And here we are, like February of 2024, and her therapy has been very successful.
I've got chills.
And but talk about someone who knows about the gift of time.
Oh, yeah.
Who knows what it means to receive every day. And so I just even think like walking alongside someone who is facing a very, a terminal diagnosis, stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. You're like, wow, okay. I can see that she in a very active way has to remember that she is going to die. But I could gain from that wisdom.
No, I think we should gain from that wisdom.
Yeah.
You write something, Jen, you write this. There's a whole lot of promise and a little bit of wondering. Do you remember writing that sentence?
I do. That's Surprised by Paradox, I think, right? Yeah.
Where were you? It brings me to tears.
Oh,
why did you write that? Why? There's a whole lot of promise and a little bit of wondering.
Yeah. I think wondering is something I've been trying to cultivate my whole faith journey. And I wouldn't say that I wondered early on, except for the fact that I had early stories of loss and grief. And if anything's going to get you wondering in the context of faith, it's going to be loss. It's going to be grief. It's going to be disappointment. It's going to be, God, where were you? Why didn't you show up? Why didn't you answer that prayer? How could you let this happen? That was not cultivated in me as a Christian believer. I think that I would have said that all those questions are terrible and like faithless, except for the fact that all the amazing people in Scripture ask those exact same questions. There's a ton of wondering in Scripture. Abraham wonders.
Thank goodness.
And the psalmist wonders, and Hannah wonders, and Job spends like 40 chapters or something just wondering, and his friends kind of wondering back. Yeah. Or actually, his friends didn't wonder. His friends were like, no, we have all the answers. What is the promise in wondering? I mean, I think we're brought to the mysteries of God. We're brought to a sense of our own smallness. There's a necessary humility that happens in wondering. Like, you're just like, at the end of the day, you get to, my ways, God saying, my ways are not your ways. My thoughts are not your thoughts. Like, my wisdom is higher than yours. So, which doesn't mean that it that satisfies me. I keep wondering, and I think those are fertile places. I actually think wondering is a really fertile place in faith.
Oh, do you write about fertile places? That's good.
I don't know if I think I've started to use that language in my Rule of Life workshop. I've started to talk about the fertile places, the places where like, the soil could kind of get turned up and something could be seeded here. I think we probably don't recognize the fertile places, like wondering, and then akin to that, grief, loss, doubt, disappointment. Like, how can those be the fertile places? Could trauma be a fertile place?
Absolutely. I would say yes to all of those. If we go back to your receiving.
Right.
Because that's the shift for me.
Yes.
Am I receiving the message?
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be an intention for me, for sure. Help me receive the message that you're trying to give me today.
Yes.
In this moment, in this season. Is it fitting for this season? That's so life-giving. Oh, okay. You're all just going to have to get In Good Time and Surprised by Paradox and all the others. But I don't want to leave without asking you from your book, Teach Us to Want, which I remember seeing that. It came back out in 2014. It's all about desire. What do you want? I read it back then. That was a while ago in my brain. But
mine too.
Okay, good. Thank you. but it's delving into the desires of our hearts. Why is it important to admit desire? I wanted to ask you, Jen, how do we respond faithfully when we feel that a desire of our heart has been denied? This is a little fresh and selfish of me, but I think I'm not alone. I really have not ever heard it worded that way.
Yeah.
And I definitely wanted to know why you wrote on desire, of course, but this one particular, in looking at the time, I want to honor your time. What if we feel the desire of our heart's been denied? We really believed it was from God.
Yeah. Oh, I think whenever you're talking about desire, you are always talking about disappointment too, or the possibility of it. So I think of these as like the two faces of the coin. And I think that's why we don't let ourselves desire. I mean, one of the reasons is that we're just better to expect nothing, than to get what you don't want. And then to have to face, like, what does that mean about God? So I was just recently talking to somebody who is currently in the season of praying for the thing. She hasn't been disappointed yet, but I think she knows it's a real possibility that the thing may not come through. And one of the things that I was telling her is I think that prayer is less about the thing and more about the communion and the company keeping with God.
The journey.
And so what happens in prayer, even as we go with these desireful prayers, I think if prayer could deepen a trust in us of two things about God that can help us receive these disappointments. We have to deepen our trust in his goodness and his wisdom. Because it's one thing to think God is good. And so often then we're like, well, if God is good and this is a good thing, then I will get it. But what about, and it's one thing to say that God is wise and then to think, well, I don't even know what's good and he'll just probably determine everything for me, but to kind of hold these in tension with each other, that God is good, that he's a good father. Jesus says to us, we can ask him for good things. He doesn't turn his children away, doesn't give them snakes when they ask for bread, or eggs. I don't remember. Stones, One of the things that's helped me, and I don't know if this will be helpful to you, but Tim Keller says it like this in his book on prayer. He says, we will either have what we have asked of God, or we will have what we would have asked had we had his wisdom.
Oh,
isn't that good?
That is so good.
I've said that to so many people. I've gotten more. Yeah, that is like pretty consistently in any talk I give, because I think this is like such a raw place in our spiritual lives. Like, I prayed for this thing and it was a good thing. And I thought for sure that God said, and so just to think, okay, there's something at work behind the scenes. If I don't have the thing I asked for, I'm going to have whatever I should have asked, and I don't even say should. Just say, if had I known the fuller picture, had I been able to have God's kind of like view of time, view of his eternal purposes, then he's given me the good thing. I do love the book of Job, I have to say.
It's a good book.
One of the just a writer who's helped me make sense of it is Ellen Davis. She's an Old Testament scholar, and she says that, the story of Job isn't the theology of suffering as much as it's a theology of the sufferer. Like, at the end of the day, you don't get the essential questions answered that Job's really asking. Like, why? Why?
No.
But you see the sufferer, you see the sufferer, you see the journey, you see the finally, like, putting his hand over his mouth and just realizing, okay, I've spoken what I don't know.
See correction by God,
you do.
Discipline.
Like, and just kind of a like, well, Job, who are you? And where were you when I created the foundations of the earth? And then also, then Job gets their rightful correction too and rebuke. I have to say I like that, because they had all the answers and the answers were all wrong.
I know. It's so good. Exactly. Please endeavor.
Yeah.
stand on Ellen Davis's shoulders and write us a book on Job.
Oh, I love Job. I don't think I have the chops for that, but I'm sure it'll show up in more
Oh, you're
in more
still
books.
young, so young. I think that's I finally feel like I've grown into my age and the fact
Mm,
of wisdom, and I love, as Author C. Brooks calls it, our crystallized wisdom in this phase of life. That I don't have
yes.
fluid. I'm out of this fluid, what is it called, wisdom stage, and in the crystallized wisdom stage. But uh,
Mm.
uh, I I love that wisdom for sure. I
For
don't
all of
either.
us who love to learn, I hope that doesn't, I don't think that's going to end.
I don't think it will. It's just a
Yeah.
part of. I mean, it's so biblical, so it's so part
Mm-hmm.
of God's nature.
Mm-hmm.
Jen, thank you so much. I
Oh, you're
will
so welcome. Thank you.
just let everyone know how to find you, and encourage everyone to read your work in all your articles and in your books. So keep writing,
Thank
and
you.
thank
Thanks,
you
Janelle.
for this time so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening today. Please meet Janelle over at Heartlift Central on Substack at Heartlift Central, where we can keep this remarkable conversation going. Please share today's episode with a friend and invite them to become stronger every day. Heartlifter, always remember this: you have value, worth, and dignity.